Not only do we have some football under our belts, we now have a little bit of data to work with moving forward. Today, we're kicking off our Moves to Make series, 5 actions we need to look into prior to Week 2's kickoff. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com, use promo code YouTube to get yourself 25% off any subscription plan. Look into trading for Mark Andrews. For those of us who took Mark Andrews in anticipation of a possible top 3 finish at the position, Week 1 was a travesty. Not only did he accrue all of 2 catches against the Chiefs defense in a game that put 47 points up on the board, he was wildly outproduced by teammate Isaiah Likely. Likely scored 21.6 half PPR points on 12 targets, including 9 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. He looked incredible, and the Ravens made it a point getting him the ball quickly, with 7 of his targets coming from within 9 air yards, and 2 of those coming on screens. So if Baltimore is so concerned with getting him the ball, why am I telling you to trade for Andrews? Because Kansas City was clearly game planning against the veteran tight end, forcing the Ravens' hand and getting the ball to other options. And they've done this before. Here are Andrews' stat lines in his last 5 games against the Chiefs: 2 catches for 14 yards, 5 catches for 57 yards in 2021, 3 catches for 22 yards in 2020, 3 catches for 15 yards in 2019, and 0 catches back in 2018. He averaged 3.46 half PPR points per game in that sample, right in line with what he did on the season opener. Moving forward, the Ravens' schedule lightens up a bit. They're not very likely to have more games in which Lamar Jackson faces a 47.1% pressure rate. Andrews' typical seam stretching ability was stunted by bracket coverage, and Lamar having George Karlaftis and Chris Jones in his pocket all night long. We can be a little worried about the Ravens' pass protection and Isaiah Likely's ability as a pass catcher, and still believe that Mark Andrews is a locked-in tight end 1 for the rest of the season. It's worth fishing around in your leagues to find an angry manager. Drop Luke Musgrave, but don't add Tucker Kraft. The most important takeaway from the Packers' narrow 34-29 loss against the Eagles in Brazil is that Jordan Love went down with 6 seconds left in the game. Per 4for4 Jeff Mueller, he expected to miss somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 weeks with a grade 1-2 MCL sprain. His assumption is that Love will return in either Week 4 or Week 5. This puts a downgrade on all pass catchers, but particularly the ancillary pieces that will need volume to contribute to our fantasy squads. One player that certainly puts a kibosh on is Luke Musgrave. A streaming target of mine due to possible issues with Tucker Kraft returning from his torn pec. Musgrave managed exactly 0 fantasy points on his 2 targets, though he did lead the team with his 18.5 average depth of target. A tight end giving us a goose egg is nothing new, but his usage wasn't even close to Kraft's. Kraft was on the field for 59 snaps to Musgrave's 15, and ran 28 routes to his teammates' 8. Musgrave had his chance to prove he was the team's TE1 and instead was outshined in a huge way. So send him to the tight end graveyard of the waiver wire, but don't grab Kraft quite yet. The fact is, he still only had a 6.6% target share, and he will now have to make a living with Malik Willis throwing him the ball for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Willis has a career 52.2% completion rate on 93 dropbacks, and his 11.8% scramble rate is enough to make Lamar Jackson blush. It's safe to ignore this tight end situation for the next month. Add Tank Bigsby. During his rookie season, Tank Bigsby did everything he could to keep himself off of our 2024 fantasy radars. In his first game of last season, Bigsby fumbled away the ball that he had just picked up following a Trevor Lawrence sack and seemed to find himself in the doghouse for most of the rest of the season. In that following week, he never even touched the ball and will wind up finishing the season with a horrid 2.6 yards per carry, adding only 1 reception to his 50 carries. Week 1 of this season was far different. Possibly fueled by Travis Etienne's own mistake of fumbling the ball within the 3-yard line, Bigsby carried much of the load in a pivotal 4th quarter where the Jaguars nearly pulled out the upset win. Bigsby's eventual 12 rushes were the exact same amount as Etienne's, though he accrued 29 more yards and, importantly, didn't fumble. Maybe this is a blip on the radar, but it fits in with what Doug Peterson was hounding on this summer. In a June press conference, Peterson said, quote, "We have to get Tank going, bottom line. Like we talked about last year, we take some burden off of Etienne a little bit, keep him healthy for the remainder of the season," end quote. That seemed like nothing but coach speak at the time, but the team backed it up in both usage and snap count, as no other running back even saw the field in Week 1. Bigsby moves up from a fantasy afterthought to a potential high-end handcuff and should be on more fantasy squads than his current 2% roster rate. Keep Chase Brown on your bench, drop him in shallow leagues. The Bengals offense was, in general, less than stellar against the Patriots in Week 1. But the biggest disappointment likely came out of the running back room, as Chase Brown scored only 3.8 half PPR points in a game where he was far outsnapped by Zach Moss. And we can't blame it on game script either. With Cincinnati either tied 0-0 or playing from behind for all 60 minutes, they logged a 9.4% pass rate over expectation and a 74.5% overall pass rate, both of which were the highest marks in the league. We would have assumed this was going to benefit Brown as he produced some electric plays as a receiver in 2023. Instead, he logged on only one total snap in third down or 2-minute drill scenarios, with Moss logging 10. While he did log 3 targets over his 13 routes ran, Moss logged 4 in his 17 routes. Ultimately, Brown took only 17 total snaps to Moss's 33 and wasn't made a priority in a game where the Bengals were missing T. Higgins and had Jamar Chase listed as questionable. While the early down role was more or less split down the middle, Chase Brown is going to be unstartable in all but the deepest of leagues, with Moss handling most of the pass catching and goal line work. We could project the team to look like more of a cohesive unit moving forward, but Brown's spike weeks are going to be very difficult to predict. Add Brandin Cooks. With no real wide receiver 2 option behind CeeDee Lamb last season, Brandin Cooks emerged as a solid option, running his most routes since the 2020 season and logging 30+ in each of the team's final 6 weeks. With his ability to line up in the slot or out wide, there was a good chance he could replicate his 77.4% route participation from last year, which planted him within the top 40 most utilized options across the entire position. With 1 week of data at our disposal, that sure seems to be the case. Cooks logged a 79% snap rate, the highest mark of anyone not on the offensive line or named Dak Prescott. Not only has Michael Gallup left town and subsequently retired, the team waited until the 6th round of the NFL draft to add Ryan Flournoy to the roster. The rookie was a healthy scratch, while Jalen Tolbert was the only other wide receiver to log more than a 25% rate of offensive snaps. This lack of competition allowed Cooks to garner a 21.8% target share and led to 4 receptions, 40 yards, a touchdown, and 12.5 half PPR points. Looking ahead, the Cowboys' number 1 tight end option, Jake Ferguson, left the game and was seen with an ice wrap on his left knee. 4for4's injury expert Jeff Mueller doesn't believe it's an ACL tear, but he wouldn't rule it out either. If he is forced to miss 1 or multiple weeks, it will further solidify Brandin Cooks as the team's number 2 receiving option. With Prescott at the helm, this could mean some serious spike weeks, and he needs to be picked up anywhere he's available.